Hey, everybody, welcome to the Achieve Results Now podcast. This is Mark Cardone.
And Theron Feidt.
Today is a really interesting episode because we are talking a lot of things about changing mindset, including how to grow your emotional intelligence.
I think this is such a subject that isn't talked about a lot. In the corporate world, I think it's talked about. In leadership development, it's talked about. But certainly, I'm sure in school, it's still not talked about.
Yeah.
It's something that's very important because it really affects so much of your life.
Yeah.
Like in obviously the emotional side of it, but your career.
Right.
Dealing with people at home, all of these things. I mean, it can really have, if you do it right, a very positive effect.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you do it wrong, a negative effect.
Yeah, and I mean, for people who are listening, like emotional intelligence is really just your way of processing, kind of how things are perceived, how you feel about things, and refining that, and really refining it to be as effective as possible, because we're all bombarded every day, and we've talked about this 100 times, right? We're bombarded with information and Facebook comments and all of these things, and people just random chatter, and even our own self-talk, right? But all of those things, they impact us, and then we have a reaction and a response to it. And the better we are at controlling that response and honing it and making it an effective use of our emotions, the more successful we're going to be.
Yeah, for sure. And there's we came up with 3 words to avoid.
Yeah.
And if you can avoid these 3 words in your language, your daily use, and what you're thinking about, we feel it's going to have a very positive effect. So often we're talking about things that you need to do. I mean, that's really what Achieve Results Now. This is what you need to do. This is the action you need to take. This is a little different. It's action you shouldn't take, in other things. So in a sense, it can be easier, but just like any habit, any habit we have, we're going to have to raise our consciousness to realize when we do it. So when we make a mistake, when we're falling off, the tangent. So, let's get into it.
Well, our language plays such a huge role in our well-being, like our internal dialogue and what we say and what we put out into the world just has such look at all the examples of people who have said the wrong things, right? So the things we say out into the world, like, it all has an impact. So making sure that we're really choosing, the correct words and the best words, especially when we're talking to ourselves, what's happening in our head. This is great because we're really just saying 3 words, and we have I think it's a cool take on it, but these are 3 words that we just need to eliminate. So number 1, let's get into it, is the word always, right?
Yes.
The word always, and there's so many uses of it, right? And it's an absolute. It's I always fail at this, right? Why do I always sleep too late, right? Why do I always skip my workouts, right? I mean, think about how often we use that word in our head.
And then we can project it on others in a negative way. Why do you always say that? Why do you always come in late? Why do you always do this? This is very dangerous as a parent to a child, because the child is developing. And what that parent is doing when you negatively use the word always towards your child is you're implanting a thought, words that are going to stifle their growth.
Yeah.
And you don't even know it, right? It's horrible when I hear it, and the parent doesn't think anything of it. And in their defense, they're probably not emotionally intelligent enough to understand what they're actually doing to their child. I think some of them are doing it on purpose, but I don't think the large majority of the parents are actually doing it on purpose.
Right.
However, if you're listening to this podcast, now you know.
Right. and it's funny because you very rarely hear people say, I really appreciate how you always, put the dishes away. I really appreciate how you
Yeah,
always make sure my,
yeah,
and if you are going to use the word, right? So I mean, you should
yeah.
avoid it in that negative self-talk sense, but if you are going to use it, like put it in good use.
Yes.
And show gratitude and appreciation for people who even though they probably don't always do it
Right.
right, it's
Yeah.
just being careful how we use it.
Yeah, well, and a little bit on this. So one of the things when I'm training instructors, and these are I started at junior instructors, so this is not even high level performance or professional instructors, is I talk about language, the language
Yeah.
used with the students. So instead of saying that's the wrong leg and all of that, you say other leg. So as a
Yeah.
simple example, and if you're saying you're always not chambering that hand all the way back, using that instead of saying how about you try this, I know you can
Yeah.
do it. So using that very positive, encouraging, but by putting that always that absolute on there, especially with somebody that's developing,
Yep.
whether, like I said, they're a child or even somebody. Let's say you hired somebody, and regardless of their age, they're new at this, and then you label them as you're always doing this wrong, you're always doing that wrong.
Mhm.
Well, of course, if they're new at anything, most people are going to do everything wrong.
Yeah.
They don't know how to do it right, so of course they're going to do it wrong. But then if you label them as the person of authority, you label them as always doing it wrong, do you think they're ever going to do it right? No,
No.
you've already implanted in their head. So that's why we're talking using this in two different ways. Externally with other people, and this is something that I'm passionate about. Make sure you're really building people up and not tearing them down. And then what you brought up, which I think can be equally as important, is not using it on yourself.
Yeah. And just one more point on that, because I think it's interesting. This can go both ways, right? Like always can be something negative that you say to yourself, but you can
Sure.
also damage yourself using it in a positive way. And the way you damage yourself in a positive way, right? I've seen so many salespeople, right? That person always buys from me, right?
Mm,
So what happens, and you've seen
yeah.
this, like what happens when someone
Yep.
says, well, Theron always buys from me?
Yep.
What happens to their level of work to get you to do business with them?
You just
Yeah,
took me for granted.
absolutely.
I'm gonna feel that, and
Yep.
I'm gonna start looking for other people.
That's right. And let's talk about fighters. I always win, right? What happens to the
Yeah.
fighter who says he always wins, right?
Yeah.
How is their, like, what is their training regimen when I always win? Like, how hard do
Yeah.
they work?
Yep.
So being careful with that to limit, our ego a little bit, and always realize,
Yeah.
always realize that you can lose those things. So
Yeah.
staying, it helps towards staying hungry and staying motivated.
Right. The fighter's saying is to remain a champion, you must fight like a challenger.
That's right.
So that's, and train like a challenger too.
Mhm.
I mean, that's really where the fight is usually won, is in the training. But that's basically what you're talking about, is that mindset of, listen, we need to, if you're in sales and you want continued sales, is the only time you call them is when it's time for renewal. I have an insurance guy like that. And it
Yep.
makes me want to, like, if somebody better comes along, guess what? I might jump ship, because he after all these decades, he's not going anywhere.
Yeah, that's right.
You know?
And so I mean, on that, like let's go to our next word, right? Which is everyone. So
Yep.
everyone, and I think this is another one, because we tend to work in absolutes in our brain as it comes to groups of people,
Right.
like everyone is against me,
Right.
and I mean, I guess the alternative to this is nobody, right? Like nobody wants to help, nobody supports
Sure.
me.
Right.
So I mean, looking at that, that language, I guarantee you, if you ever say everyone or nobody, there's somebody,
Mhm.
who, like, nobody would buy my product. I guarantee you
Yeah.
there's somebody who would buy a crock full of fluffernutter, right? I don't know why they would buy it. Maybe just to like see the fluffernutter ooze out of the holes. That'd be amazing. But
But you're proof of this, because you've sold some weird stuff.
I've sold weird things. I just bought a pair of chopsticks that goes on your fingers so you can still text and eat without getting your phone all smudgy. I
Really?
mean, yeah, I sure did. So I mean, so when you think about it, you know, anytime you say nobody or everybody, you need to adjust your language to the people in my circle or the people that I'm
Yeah.
in contact with, the people that I'm looking at, right, are this way. Maybe I need to go find or start talking to people who are different than that.
Right. Yeah. And this goes, of course, deeper. You're looking at when you say everyone of a certain ethnicity, everyone of a certain color. So the racism, the bigotry, all of that also, this in a small sense, not that it will, but it can lead to that
Yeah.
if that's your level of thinking, because that certainly isn't the case,
Yeah.
of course, and that's a sign of emotional stupidity.
Yep.
If you categorize people and you generalize, and to get into a little bit more, we're built to generalize because there's so much information coming in our world. You think about right now what you're doing. If you think about all the things that you're doing, all the things your body is doing internally to keep you alive, and then all the external information you have coming at you, if that was all conscious, you'd go crazy, right?
Yeah.
You couldn't process this. So, but what we do is sometimes it's done out of laziness, mental laziness. Sometimes it's done out of just to make things quicker. That we generalize, and that's what this is talking about.
Yeah.
Where when we say everyone and no one or nobody.
And I love this from an emotional intelligence standpoint, because because the question that like immediately comes to mind is, well, how do I know what I should focus on more, right? Like whether or not my butt is sitting on, a felt couch or a corduroy couch, like my brain doesn't really need to focus attention onto that, because it really, at the end of the day, doesn't matter, unless you're wearing corduroy pants, and then you're going to have that weird whatever's going on. But for the most part, there's things how do you know what to focus on? Your gut will tell you, right? Like
Yeah.
when you see something and you go, oh, I mean, a big one I know, especially when you and I were kind of coming up through the past 10 years, was like, all those millennials are lazy, right? Like all those,
Sure. Yeah.
the kids don't work as hard as we do, right?
Yeah.
I can tell you, so if you're listening to this and that's your viewpoint, I can tell you, as someone who helps people open businesses, I know millennials, I know all generations that are harder workers than I have ever been.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think, to your point, which is great, understanding that you're like, whatever limited view you're working from when you're looking at that everyone and no one scenario,
Yeah.
it can be very easily, like if you're getting that gut like ickiness about it, it can be very easily fixed by just going and meeting new people. You know what I mean? Do some research.
Yeah.
Millennials who have opened businesses, you'll change your viewpoint real quick.
Yeah, for sure. And then the last word is never.
Never.
We want to avoid never.
I never get this
and
right.
what never does, never shuts off your action, never shuts off your thinking, never just stops everything. And so often when we're working towards our goals, we're working towards achieve something, we're working towards changing something, it takes time. And if we stop before we have enough time to build momentum or to make change, then nothing's going to happen.
Yeah. This is a great example of, you don't fail until you quit, right? You don't fail until you quit. And if you go into something saying, well, I'm never going to get in shape, or, I'm never going to earn enough money, or I'm never going to find that relationship that I really want, then you're speaking the truth, right? You never will.
Right.
And that's why it's such a dangerous word. Like, I mean, if you keep working at something and you do what we say on the podcast and listen to positive messages, and you keep improving yourself, I mean, obviously insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, right? But if you're doing things and you're progressing and you're getting a little better every time, or even maybe if you completely tank and then you just get back on the horse, you're going to eventually get there if it remains an important priority and a goal for you. So saying things like, oh, I'm never going to get my black belt, or I'm never going to get into shape, or I'm never going to, it's literally a pity party. That's all it is.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's so important that, well, let me back up. The reason why we do this podcast weekly isn't because we have all this extra time, or even we're making all this extra money. We're right. I mean, we're not doing this podcast for either reason. Okay. We're doing it because we want to help people. We're doing it because we have things that we feel we can share that are valuable. And I know, because every day I'm trying to learn something new. I'm trying to fill my mind with something positive. I'm trying to teach something positive every day. That's helped me tremendously in life. It's helped me be more stable, and just not go through the ups and downs that I think a lot of people do.
Yeah.
And if you and I can help other people do that, it makes a huge difference. I mean, so often people will work out every day, which is important to work out on a consistent basis, but they don't do anything for their mind. They're negative, and they're not reading anything positive. They're not listening to anything positive. And like we talked before, nowadays it's so easy to find something, and everything is free.
Yeah.
Literally, just not everything, but almost everything is free that you want to listen to. So the barrier of entry to listen to positive things is so low now.
Yeah, it is. It's very low, and it's so easy. And the negative messages are out there, and they're easy to find, right?
Very.
I mean, one use of never, you'll never run out of places to find negative messages, right? Because it's the lowest hanging fruit, right?
And it sells.
And it sells. But being able, and that's the beauty of like this episode specifically, being able to control that internal dialogue and that mindset, so that you could be the only person in a garbage dump that's seeing flowers, right? And that's like, it's such a skill to develop. And through history, I mean, if you read books written hundreds of years ago, people prioritize that as one of the top skills that makes people produce and makes people successful, is their ability to change their mindset to continue to progress. So I really hope this podcast helps, because it's such a great topic.
Agreed.
So let's go back. Let's review our words again.
Okay. So three words to avoid saying and also thinking about.
Yep. Number 1, always try to avoid it in all senses.
Always try to avoid
always. Avoid always.
The second word or words is everyone, and then you can use the other side, that nobody.
Yep.
So because they can be used, you obviously want to avoid that.
Yep. And number 3, never. Always avoid never. No, I'm just kidding. But never. So stay away from kind of that pity party in your head of, I'll never do this, or I never do this, because I'm sure there's times when you've seen that success, you've seen that progress. Focus on those times, because that's what's going to help you move forward. And that wraps up this episode of the podcast. Thanks for listening, everybody. Make sure you subscribe, and we will see you on the next episode.
Thanks.